Hello everyone! In this video, we will demonstrate how to use transaction function in the RiceTrace. Specifically, in this video, we will show how to register transaction of SRP-verified rice that will be claimed as verified rice from verified seller to verified buyer. This type of transaction applies to SRP rice that is not in the form of a retail pack or final product. The transaction flow will be, first, seller to submit transaction record in RiceTrace. After that, the buyer will have to review it and either reject or approve it. If the buyer find incorrect information, the buyer can reject it and it will be sent back to the seller to revise it. If everything is good, then the buyer can approve it and it will be forwarded to SRP to review. If SRP find any mistake or insufficient information, the transaction status will be set to withdrawn. Then the seller has to move the transaction status from withdrawn to draft before the seller can revise and resubmit it. The buyer has 7 days to review the transaction record after submitted by the seller. If there is no response within 7 days from the buyer, the transaction will be automatically approved and will be submitted to SRP. This is the detailed information of the transaction example that we will record in RiceTrace. We have to prepare the purchase order date and number, as well as the invoice date and number related to this transaction. Transaction evidence must also be prepared, such as a bill of lading, invoice, or purchase order, because supporting evidence for the transaction must be uploaded in the record. The identification code can be production lot number or any code that can be used to trace the product, if required in the future. Now we can start by clicking Transaction in Traceability menu and then click Add to create a new one. Let's fill the form following the detailed information that we have earlier. Please upload the transaction evidence here. For this example, I will use purchase order file as the evidence. Please select the Send Original TC to according to the buyer. If none is correct, we can select Other and add explanation. But for this transaction, we will select Importer. Please also select the Send Original TC by. Electronic means can be by facsimile. If none is correct, we can select Other and put explanation. For our case, we will select by email. We continue to fill out the purchase order and invoice details. Please don't forget to upload the files here. As we have 2 invoices, click this Add Another Invoice button to fill the second invoice information. Next is to fill out the shipping information. Please note that only data with red asterisk is mandatory to fill out. Now we have finished filling out the form. You can save the form if you plan to modify it later before sending it to the buyer by clicking this Save button. In this case, I will directly submit the form to the buyer by clicking this Submit Transaction button. After that, we can see the transaction status here, that is, waiting for acknowledgement from the buyer. In this example, we have received a response from the buyer. The status is now rejected. The buyer reject the request. Click the transaction to find the detail of the rejection. As we can see here, the buyer requests us to revise the second invoice number. We can revise it by clicking Edit, and then revise the invoice number, change the question mark to /. Now we can submit it again to the buyer to have the approval. We can see that the transaction status is changed again from rejected to waiting for acknowledgement. Once the buyer approved the TC request, we can see here that the status has been changed to approved by buyer and ready for review by SRP. Once SRP approves your transaction, the TC will be automatically issued. If SRP withdraws the transaction, the status will be changed to withdrawn. You can then move the transaction from withdrawn back to draft, review and revise the information, and resubmit it. If, for example, the transaction has been approved by buyer and forwarded to SRP. After reviewing the transaction, SRP decides to reject the transaction and withdraw it. We can check the status on this transaction overview page and filter the status to withdrawn. If you can't find the withdrawn transaction, click this button to show all transaction, including the hidden transaction. Once you find it, you can click it to open and make necessary revision. To revise the transaction form, click this Edit button. Once you have done to revise it, click this Submit Transaction button to request approval from the buyer again. If the transaction is approved by buyer and SRP, the transaction status is marked as approved by SRP. We have reached the end of this video. If you have any further question, please do not hesitate to contact us through assurance@sustainablerice.org. Thank you for watching.